When a billionaire CEO humiliated a black waitress for lacking education, he had no idea she held the key to saving his crumbling empire. What happened next left him speechless and changed everything. In the polished marble halls of the prestigious Meridian Club, Angela Washington moves quietly, gracefully, like she has for the past 3 years. The scent of aged leather and expensive cologne hangs heavy in the air, mingling with the soft clink of crystal glasses and the murmur of million-dollar deals being made over lunch. No one knows that behind her gentle smile lies a mind that once revolutionized sustainable energy systems. No one even notices when she pauses near tables where powerful men discuss problems that keep them awake at night. But when tech mogul Richard Blackstone and his board members struggle with their company's catastrophic algorithm failure, she listens. Her trained ears catch every technical detail, every frustrated admission of defeat. What they didn't know was that Angela had spent 7 years developing the exact solution they desperately needed. And with just a few quietly spoken words, she was about to turn their world upside down. The autumn sun filters through towering windows, casting long shadows across the dining room, where titans of industry feast on imported delicacies. Angela refills water glasses with practiced precision, her movements economical and purposeful. She's learned to be invisible here. A black woman in her early 30s, dressed in the club's standard white shirt and black vest, serving men who see her as part of the furniture. Richard Blackstone sits at table 12, his $5,000 suit wrinkled from stress, his usually perfect silver hair disheveled. The other board members lean forward, voices hushed but urgent. Angela approaches with the coffee service, her soft-soled shoes silent on the Persian rug. "The entire neural network is corrupted," Blackstone says, rubbing his temples. 6 months of customer data completely inaccessible. "We're hemorrhaging $3 million a day." Angela's hand steadies as she pours, but inside her pulse quickens. She knows that architecture. She helped design the theoretical framework at MIT. "Have you tried implementing a gradient descent optimization with batch normalization?" The words escape her lips before she can stop them, barely above a whisper. The table falls silent. Blackstone looks up, his cold blue eyes scanning Angela as if noticing her for the first time. His expression shifts from confusion to barely concealed irritation. "Excuse me?" His voice drips with condescension. "Did our waitress just try to give us technical advice?" The other board members chuckle uncomfortably. Angela feels heat rise in her cheeks, but she maintains her composure, setting down the coffee pot with steady hands. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to interrupt." Blackstone's smile is razor thin. "No, please enlighten us. I'm sure your extensive education in—" He pauses dramatically, looking her up and down. "Coffee service has prepared you to solve problems that have stumped our team of MIT and Stanford graduates." The laughter around the table is sharper now, cruel. Angela's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly, but her voice remains soft, professional. "Of course not, sir. My apologies." As she turns to leave, Blackstone's voice follows her. "Some people should know their place. Stick to what you know, sweetheart. Leave the thinking to those qualified to do it. Because sometimes the most brilliant minds hide behind the most humble circumstances, waiting for someone brave enough to listen." If this story moves you, hit that subscribe button. We share incredible stories of overlooked heroes every week. Rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell us about a time you witnessed hidden talent being dismissed. Your stories matter, and they inspire our next videos. Have you ever been underestimated because of your appearance or position? Share your experience below. Your voice could be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Angela Washington had worked at the Meridian Club for 3 years, serving lunch to men who made more in an hour than she earned in a year. She arrived each morning at 10 a.m. sharp, pressed uniform crisp, natural hair pulled back in a neat bun that met the club's professional appearance standards. The wealthy members walked by her as if she were invisible wallpaper, discussing mergers and acquisitions while she refilled their glasses and cleared their plates. But Angela watched. She always watched. The dining room buzzed with the quiet intensity of power lunches and backroom deals. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over mahogany tables where senators, CEOs, and tech moguls shaped the world's future. Angela moved between them like a ghost, collecting fragments of conversations that revealed the intricate web of modern business and politics. On that crisp October afternoon, Angela heard something that made her blood run cold. She was wiping down the adjacent table when Blackstone's voice rose above his usual murmur. "The quantum encryption layer is completely compromised," said Marcus Chen, Blackstone's CTO, his voice tight with stress. "Every attempt to restore the backup protocols fails. The system keeps rejecting our authentication keys." Angela moved closer, ostensibly to collect empty glasses. Those words weren't foreign to her. Quantum encryption, backup protocols, authentication keys. This was her language. Spoken fluently in a world that now seemed impossibly distant. She whispered, almost to herself, "Have you checked the hash function integrity?" Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the company's lead data scientist, turned sharply. "What did you say?" Angela's heart hammered against her ribs. She shouldn't have spoken. She knew better. But the solution was so clear, so obvious to her trained mind. "I said, have you checked the hash function integrity? Sometimes when quantum systems fail like that, it's because the cryptographic hash functions have been corrupted at the source level, not just the encrypted data itself." The table erupted in dismissive laughter. Blackstone leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, studying Angela with the cold amusement of a predator examining wounded prey. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced loudly enough for neighboring tables to hear, "our waitress thinks she understands quantum computing." He turned to Angela with mock sincerity. "Tell me, what university did you attend to gain such expertise?" "The University of Hard Knocks?" Morrison joined in, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Perhaps she learned about hash functions from watching YouTube videos during her breaks. Angela's hands trembled slightly as she reached for an empty glass, but her voice remained steady. "I'm sorry. I overheard and thought." "That's your problem right there," Blackstone interrupted, his smile predatory. "You thought? Leave the thinking to people who actually have degrees in this field. Your job is to serve drinks and keep quiet." The humiliation burned through Angela like acid, but she'd endured worse. She'd learned to swallow her pride in this place, to let their ignorance wash over her like rain. She nodded quietly, gathered the remaining glasses, and walked away with her dignity intact but her heart aching. But deep inside, something had stirred. Not anger, she'd processed that emotion years ago. This was something else. Recognition. The same dismissive arrogance that had driven her from academia was sitting at table 12, mocking her while begging for solutions she could provide in her sleep. That evening in the staff break room, Angela sat alone with her dinner, leftover soup from the kitchen and a roll she'd saved from lunch service. Her phone buzzed with a text from her younger brother Michael, a senior at Howard University. "How's the serving life, Dr. Washington?" The message included a laughing emoji, but Angela knew Michael's humor masked his frustration with her choices. Dr. Washington. She hadn't been called that in 3 years. Angela stared at her reflection in the break room's cracked mirror. The woman looking back wore a food service uniform and an expression of quiet resignation. But behind her dark eyes lay 7 years of advanced study, groundbreaking research, and patents that had revolutionized sustainable energy systems before personal tragedy forced her to walk away from everything she'd built. The irony wasn't lost on her. Richard Blackstone's company, Nova Tech Industries, had built their quantum computing division using principles she'd helped establish. The very algorithms failing them now were based on her published research from 2018. If they'd bothered to look at her work, really look, instead of skimming past her name, they might have recognized the solutions staring them in the face. But they saw a black woman in a service uniform and their minds shut down. Their loss was about to become much greater than they imagined. 3 days later, the Novatech executives still lingered at their usual table, voices growing sharper with each failed attempt to solve their crisis. Angela approached with the lunch service, her movements careful and deliberate. She'd spent the past 3 days researching their specific problem, accessing technical journals through her old university login that somehow still worked. "The losses are accelerating," Chen reported grimly. "We're at 4.2 million daily now. If we can't restore customer access by next week, we're looking at a complete system rebuild. That's 18 months minimum, assuming we can even secure the funding." Angela set down their plates with practiced silence, but her trained mind was racing. A complete rebuild wasn't necessary. They were approaching the problem from entirely the wrong angle. She'd seen this exact failure pattern before, during her doctoral research. Without thinking, she spoke. "You don't need a rebuild. The core architecture is sound. You need to implement a recursive validation protocol that bypasses the compromised authentication layer while maintaining quantum entanglement integrity. Dead silence. 8 pairs of eyes turned to her, their expressions ranging from disbelief to outright hostility. Jesus Christ, Blackstone muttered, his face flushing red. Are we really doing this again? Dr. Morrison stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is ridiculous. Richard, I think we need to speak to the manager about staff overstepping boundaries. But Angela was past caring about boundaries. 3 years of serving these people, of being invisible while they struggled with problems she could solve in her sleep, had finally pushed her beyond her breaking point. The recursive validation protocol would create a secondary authentication pathway, she continued, her voice gaining strength. By implementing a distributed hash table with Byzantine fault tolerance, you could maintain system integrity while isolating the corrupted segments for individual repair. Blackstone's laugh was harsh and bitter. Distributed hash tables. Byzantine fault tolerance. Where exactly are you pulling these terms from? Did you memorize some technical manual? The same place you learned about quantum encryption, Angela replied quietly. MIT, where I completed my PhD in quantum computing and artificial intelligence in 2019. The silence stretched taut as piano wire. Morrison's mouth fell open. Chen's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. But Blackstone's expression hardened into something cold and cruel. Right, of course. The waitress has a PhD from MIT. His voice rose, drawing attention from other tables. And I suppose next you'll tell us you've published research in quantum computing. 17 peer-reviewed papers, Angela said softly, including quantum entanglement protocols for distributed computing systems in Nature Quantum Information, which your entire platform is built on. She turned to walk away, but Blackstone's voice stopped her cold. You know what? I've had enough of this fantasy. He pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. Let's see. Angela Washington, MIT PhD. He paused, and for a moment uncertainty flickered across his features. Then his expression hardened again. Even if any of this were true, which it's not, what are you doing serving coffee? Real PhDs don't end up waiting tables. The question hung in the air like poison. Around them, other diners had gone quiet, sensing drama. Angela felt the weight of their stares, the unspoken judgments, the assumptions about her life, her choices, her worth. Maybe, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Real PhDs sometimes have to choose between their careers and their families. Maybe sometimes love matters more than recognition. She walked away then, ignoring Blackstone's bitter laughter, ignoring Morrison's whispered comments about delusional staff, ignoring the burning shame that threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained composure. In the kitchen, head chef Roberto Delgado looked up from his prep work. He'd known Angela for 3 years, had watched her handle abuse with grace and dignity that humbled him. You okay, mija? He asked softly. Angela nodded, not trusting her voice. But this time she didn't cry. This time she didn't retreat into the safe space of invisibility. This time something hard and bright had crystallized in her chest. Not anger, but determination. That wasn't just embarrassment. That was pride finally waking up. In her small studio apartment that evening, Angela sat with her laptop open to a research paper that still bore her name. The screen glowed in the darkness, illuminating equations and algorithms that had once been her whole world. On the coffee table beside her lay a framed photograph, herself in MIT graduation regalia, standing next to an older black man whose proud smile lit up the entire image. Daddy would have been so angry today, she thought, not at Blackstone's ignorance, but at her silence in the face of it. The pages of her doctoral dissertation were bookmarked on her computer, filled with groundbreaking research on quantum computing applications that had earned her international recognition. Back then, this had been her language, as natural as breathing. Conference presentations at Stanford, research collaborations with Google's quantum team, patents that tech giants fought over in court. The last time she'd touched this work, she'd been Dr. Angela Washington, rising star in quantum computing, with 3 job offers from major tech companies and a research grant that would have set her up for life. That was before the phone call that changed everything. Angela, you need to come home. Mama's in the hospital. She'd been in her lab at MIT working on the algorithm that would eventually become the foundation for Novatech's entire platform. The call came at 2 a.m., Michael's voice shaking with fear and exhaustion. What happened? Stroke, a bad one. The doctors, they don't know if she'll wake up. Angela had stared at her computer screen, at the breakthrough she'd been chasing for months, finally within reach. Then she'd saved her work, closed the laptop, and booked the first flight to Atlanta. Their mother, Sarah Washington, had raised Angela and Michael alone after their father died when Angela was 15. Sarah had worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and watching kids during the day, to put Angela through undergraduate school. When Angela got into MIT's PhD program with a full fellowship, Sarah had cried for hours, holding the acceptance letter like it was made of gold. "My baby's going to be a doctor," she'd whispered. "A real doctor. Your daddy would be so proud." The stroke left Sarah partially paralyzed, her speech slurred, her brilliant mind trapped in a body that no longer obeyed her commands. The medical bills piled up like autumn leaves, even with insurance. Angela took a leave of absence from MIT that stretched into months, then a year. She moved back to Atlanta, found a job that paid enough to cover the mounting expenses, and watched her mother slowly fight her way back to a shadow of her former self. Michael had begged her to return to her research. "Mama wouldn't want you to give this up," he'd argued. "She'd want you to finish what you started." But Angela had seen the fear in her mother's eyes during those long hospital nights, the way she gripped Angela's hand whenever the doctors talked about long-term care facilities. Sarah Washington had sacrificed everything for her children. Now it was Angela's turn. When MIT finally required a decision about her dissertation defense, Angela had made her choice. She submitted her completed research, defended remotely, and quietly let her academic career slip away. The job offers expired. The research collaborations dissolved. The patents she'd developed were licensed by companies that never bothered to learn her story. She'd found work at the Meridian Club through a friend of a friend. Good pay, health insurance, and flexible hours that let her care for her mother. The members treated her like furniture, but she'd learned to wear their dismissal like armor. She was serving a higher purpose than their recognition. Sarah had passed peacefully 2 years ago, surrounded by family, her medical bills paid in full. At the funeral, Angela had stood over her mother's casket and whispered a promise. "I kept my word. Mama, I was here." But now, sitting in her apartment with her research glowing on the screen, Angela felt something shifting inside her chest. Not regret. She would make the same choice again without hesitation. But recognition that her sacrifice didn't have to mean permanent silence. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Nova Tech stock plummets as data crisis continues. She read the article with growing interest. The company was hemorrhaging value, their reputation in free fall, their quantum computing division on the verge of collapse. Everything they'd built on her foundational research was crumbling, because they couldn't solve a problem she'd encountered and overcome years ago. Angela pulled up her old research notes, fingers flying across the keyboard as she accessed archived files she hadn't touched in years. There it was, the exact solution to Nova Tech's crisis buried in her 2018 paper on quantum system failure recovery. She'd even included a detailed protocol for exactly the kind of authentication breakdown they were experiencing. She cross-referenced her work with the latest reports on Nova Tech's problems. The match was perfect. Not only could she fix their system, she could improve it, make it more robust, more secure than they'd ever imagined possible. But this time, Angela didn't cry over lost opportunities or unfulfilled potential. She turned to her computer and started typing, her fingers remembering the rhythm of complex code, her mind awakening like a dormant volcano suddenly stirring to life. "There it is," she whispered to the empty apartment. It was always there. Outside, the city hummed with late-night energy. Inside, Dr. Angela Washington began to reclaim her rightful place in the world, one line of code at a time. Tomorrow, she would walk into the Meridian Club as a waitress. But tonight, she was remembering what it felt like to be brilliant. The Meridian Club was still shrouded in pre-dawn darkness when Angela stepped through the staff entrance at 5:47 a.m. The night security guard, Marcus, looked up from his newspaper with surprise. "Angela, you're early today. Everything all right?" She smiled, but there was something different about her expression, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there the day before. "Just wanted to get some things done before the lunch rush." The dining room lay in peaceful silence, chairs stacked on tables, crystal glasses gleaming in the dim emergency lighting. Angela moved through the space with purpose, but not toward the kitchen or service station. Instead, she headed directly to the club's business center, a small room with computers and printers that members used for urgent work. She'd noticed it during her first week, had memorized the door code by watching members punch it in hundreds of times. The club's Wi-Fi password was written on a sticky note attached to the monitor, because even billionaires sometimes forgot their login credentials. Angela settled at the computer and cracked her knuckles. It had been 3 years since she'd written serious code, but her fingers remembered the rhythm. She pulled up Novatech's public API documentation and began mapping their system architecture, cross-referencing it with news reports about their specific failures. There, the vulnerability was exactly where she'd expected it to be. A cascade failure in their quantum authentication protocols, triggered by a corrupted hash function that had infected their entire distributed network. The kind of problem that would take their team months to diagnose and fix, assuming they ever figured out the root cause. For Angela, it was a Tuesday morning puzzle. She opened a secure development environment and began coding. The recursive validation protocol flowed from her fingertips like poetry, elegant, efficient, beautiful in its simplicity. She built in Byzantine fault tolerance, added redundant verification layers, and created automated repair sequences that would not only fix the current crisis, but prevent similar failures in the future. 3 hours later, she leaned back and studied her work. The solution was complete. Not just a patch, but a fundamental improvement to Novatech's entire quantum computing platform. She'd essentially rebuilt their core algorithms from the ground up, making them faster, more secure, and infinitely more robust. But she didn't stop there. Angela created a detailed technical report explaining the problem, the solution, and the implementation protocol. She included optimization suggestions that would improve Novatech's system performance by 30%. Then she packaged everything into an encrypted file and uploaded it to a secure server. The final step was the most important. Angela opened Novatech's customer support portal and created an anonymous account. In the subject line, she wrote, "Solution to quantum authentication failure. Complete system recovery protocol." In the message body, she typed, "Your quantum computing platform is experiencing cascade failures due to corrupted cryptographic hash functions at the base authentication layer. The attached files contain a complete solution including implementation code, testing protocols, and performance optimizations. This fix will restore all customer data and prevent future similar failures. The solution has been tested against your exact system specifications and will resolve your crisis within 24 hours of implementation. No payment requested. Just implement the solution and save your company." She attached her files and clicked send. The timestamp read 8:23 a.m. When she finished, Angela looked at the screen for a long moment. Then she quietly deleted her browser history, wiped the temporary files, and returned everything to exactly how she'd found it. By 9 a.m., she was back in the service uniform, setting up tables for the lunch crowd. When the Novatech executives arrived at their usual table at 11:30, she greeted them with the same professional smile she'd worn for 3 years. Richard Blackstone looked haggard, his expensive suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. The other board members appeared equally exhausted. Angela poured their coffee with steady hands, invisible once again. "Any word from the development team?" Morrison asked, her voice tight with stress. "Nothing useful," Chen replied grimly. "We're down to praying for a miracle." Angela walked away, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. Sometimes miracles came in the most unexpected packages. At 12:47 p.m., Chen's phone rang. He answered with barely contained desperation. "What do you mean, anonymous solution?" His voice rose sharply, drawing stares from nearby tables. "Are you serious? How is that possible?" The entire Novatech table went silent. Angela continued serving other guests, but her ears were tuned to their conversation. "Send it to me immediately," Chen barked into the phone. "And get our entire development team on this right now." He hung up and turned to his colleagues, his face pale with disbelief. "Someone just sent us a complete solution to our quantum authentication failure. Anonymous submission through our support portal." Blackstone's eyes narrowed. "What kind of solution?" "Complete system recovery protocol. The preliminary analysis says it's brilliant. Our head of development called it the most elegant quantum computing solution he's ever seen. Angela refilled their water glasses, her expression carefully neutral. Within minutes, Chen's laptop was open on the table, the entire board leaning forward as they read through Angela's technical documentation. Their expressions shifted from skepticism to amazement to something approaching awe. "This person doesn't just understand our system," Morrison whispered. "They understand it better than we do. Look at these optimizations. They've identified vulnerabilities we didn't even know existed." "The implementation protocol is flawless," Chen added, scrolling through pages of code. "Whoever wrote this has intimate knowledge of quantum entanglement theory and distributed computing systems. This is PhD-level work, maybe beyond PhD level." Blackstone stared at the screen, his face cycling through confusion, hope, and growing excitement. "How long to implement?" "If this works the way they claim, 6 hours, maybe less." The room erupted in urgent phone calls. Angela watched from across the dining room as Novatech's leadership team transformed from defeated executives into energized warriors, barking orders at development teams, scheduling emergency board meetings, preparing for what could be the most important day in their company's history. At 2:15 p.m., Angela's shift ended. She changed out of her uniform, said goodbye to the kitchen staff, and walked out into the autumn afternoon. Behind her, the Meridian Club hummed with the electricity of powerful people who had just been handed an impossible gift. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Novatech stock surges on reports of breakthrough solution to data crisis. Angela smiled and kept walking. The real show was just beginning. By 6 p.m. that evening, Novatech's development team had successfully implemented Angela's solution. The quantum authentication system came back online flawlessly. Customer data was fully restored, and system performance had improved by 37%, even better than Angela had projected. The next morning, the financial world was buzzing. Novatech's stock had jumped 42% in after-hours trading. Tech blogs were calling it the most remarkable corporate recovery in recent memory. Investors who had written off the company 24 hours earlier were now scrambling to buy shares. At the Meridian Club, the Novatech executives occupied their usual table, but the atmosphere was entirely different. They spoke in excited whispers, phones constantly buzzing with congratulatory calls from investors, board members, and competitors trying to understand how they'd pulled off such an impossible turnaround. Angela approached with the lunch service, her expression professionally neutral despite the satisfaction warming her chest. "The FBI Cybercrimes Unit wants to interview us," Chen was saying, his voice a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "They can't believe someone solved this anonymously. They're concerned about corporate espionage." "Let them investigate," Blackstone replied, cutting into his steak with aggressive precision. "I want to know who did this more than they do. Someone with this level of expertise doesn't just appear out of nowhere." Morrison looked up from her tablet. "I've been analyzing the code structure all morning. The programming style, the algorithmic approaches, even the variable naming conventions, they're familiar. I've seen this work before." Angela's hand trembled almost imperceptibly as she refilled Morrison's coffee cup. "What do you mean?" Blackstone asked. "The recursive validation protocol, the Byzantine fault tolerance implementation. This mirrors the foundational research published in 2018 by, oh, what was the name?" Morrison scrolled through her tablet. "Dr. Angela Washington, MIT. Her paper on quantum entanglement protocols for distributed computing systems." The coffee cup slipped from Angela's suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering against the marble floor. Hot coffee splashed across expensive shoes and the Persian rug. "Oh, I'm so sorry." Angela knelt immediately, gathering the broken pieces with shaking hands. "I'll clean this up right away." But Morrison was staring at her with growing intensity. "Angela Washington," she repeated slowly. That's your name, isn't it?" The dining room seemed to slow around them. Other conversations continued, but Angela felt as if she were trapped in a bubble of absolute silence. She looked up from the broken cup to find 8 pairs of eyes fixed on her with varying degrees of suspicion, confusion, and dawning realization. "I need to get a mop," Angela said quietly, starting to stand. "No." Blackstone's voice was sharp, commanding. "Sit down." Angela remained kneeling, her hands still full of ceramic shards. "Sir, I need to clean." I said, "Sit down." Blackstone's tone brooked no argument. In that chair. Right now. The other diners were beginning to notice the commotion. Angela could feel their stares, their whispered speculations. But she had faced worse humiliations in this room. She carefully placed the broken pieces on the table and took the chair Blackstone indicated, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. Morrison was typing frantically on her tablet. Dr. Angela Washington, MIT PhD in Quantum Computing and Artificial Intelligence, graduated 2019. 17 peer-reviewed publications in major journals. Primary research focus on quantum entanglement protocols and distributed computing systems. She looked up, her face pale. The foundational algorithms our entire platform is built on. Chen leaned forward. Show me her picture. Morrison turned the tablet around. There on the screen was a professional headshot of Angela in academic regalia, 5 years younger. Her smile bright with possibility and promise. The woman in the photograph looked like she could conquer the world. The silence stretched taut as each board member compared the image to the woman sitting across from them in a food service uniform. The same high cheekbones, the same intelligent dark eyes, the same quiet strength, but overlaid now with years of invisibility and careful humility. Blackstone's face had gone through several color changes. You're telling me that our waitress is Dr. Angela Washington from MIT? Was, Angela said quietly. I was Dr. Angela Washington. The hell does that mean? Morrison's voice was sharp with confusion and something approaching anger. You don't stop being a PhD. You don't just walk away from this level of expertise. Angela met her gaze steadily. You do when your mother has a stroke and someone has to pay for her medical care. You do when choosing between a research career and family isn't really a choice at all. The table erupted in overlapping voices. Why didn't you tell us who you were? Do you have any idea what we've been going through? How long have you been working here? Angela raised her hand slightly and somehow the gesture commanded silence. When she spoke, her voice was calm, controlled, carrying a quiet authority that none of them had ever heard from their waitress. 3 years, she said. I've been serving you lunch for 3 years. I've listened to you discuss problems I could solve in my sleep. I've watched you struggle with algorithms I helped create. I've been invisible to you for 3 years until you needed something only I could give you. Blackstone leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. You sent us the solution. It wasn't a question. Angela didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. Why? Chen asked. Why help us? After what happened yesterday. Angela was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. Because I didn't leave my field out of bitterness or failure. I left out of love. And love doesn't keep score. When I saw you struggling with a problem I could solve, helping you wasn't about your behavior. It was about my character. She stood slowly, smoothing down her uniform. My shift is over. If you'll excuse me. Wait. Blackstone's voice was softer now, almost uncertain. We need to talk properly. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. in the boardroom upstairs. Angela looked at him for a long moment. I'll be working tomorrow morning. Lunch shift starts at 11. Not anymore, Blackstone said quietly. Tomorrow morning we talk. As equals. For the first time in 3 years, Angela smiled at table 12 with genuine warmth. Dr. Washington will be there. The next morning, Angela walked through the front entrance of the Meridian Club for the first time in 3 years. Instead of her server's uniform, she wore a navy blue dress suit, one she'd kept from her academic days, still crisp and professional. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant twist, and she carried a leather portfolio containing printed copies of all her research. The club's general manager, Patricia Henley, did a double-take as Angela approached the front desk. Dr. Washington? Patricia had clearly been briefed on the morning's unusual circumstances. Mr. Blackstone is waiting for you in the executive boardroom. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt both endless and too short. Angela used the time to center herself, to remember who she was beneath 3 years of careful invisibility. Dr. Angela Washington, quantum computing pioneer, published researcher, problem solver. That woman had never left. She'd just been patient, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The boardroom door was heavy oak with brass fittings. Angela knocked once and entered. The space was designed to intimidate, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, A massive conference table surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's cars. But Angela had presented her doctoral defense in rooms like this. She belonged here. Blackstone sat at the head of the table, but he rose as she entered. A gesture of respect she'd never seen him offer anyone, much less his waitress. Chen and Morrison flanked him, their expressions carefully neutral but alert. "Dr. Washington," Blackstone said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." Angela shook his hand firmly. "Mr. Blackstone." She took the seat across from him and placed her portfolio on the table with deliberate precision. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Blackstone cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology," he began, his voice lacking its usual commanding arrogance. "Multiple apologies, actually. For 3 years I've treated you with dismissive disrespect. Yesterday I humiliated you publicly, and through it all you possessed the knowledge that could have saved my company months of crisis and millions of dollars in losses." Angela inclined her head slightly. "Accepted, just like that? What would you have me do? Hold a grudge that serves no purpose? Demand groveling that would diminish us both? You've acknowledged your behavior. That's sufficient," Morrison leaned forward. "Your solution didn't just fix our problem. It fundamentally improved our entire platform. The performance gains alone are worth hundreds of millions in increased efficiency and customer satisfaction. The optimization protocols were based on research I completed but never published," Angela replied. "I had some time to think through the applications." Chen opened his laptop and turned it toward her. The screen showed Novatech's stock price, up 67% since the solution's implementation. "You saved our company. The market cap increase since yesterday is over $2 billion. Angela studied the numbers with professional interest but no apparent emotional investment. "I'm glad the solution was effective. Why?" Blackstone's voice was intense, almost desperate. "Why help us?" "After everything?" Angela was quiet for a moment, looking out the windows at the city below. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. 3 years ago, I made a choice to prioritize family over career. That choice cost me my position in academia, my research funding, my professional network. Everything I'd worked for since I was 18 years old. But it was the right choice, and I've never regretted it." She turned back to face them. "What I realized yesterday is that sacrifice doesn't require silence. I can honor my mother's memory and my family's needs while still being who I am. Your crisis gave me the opportunity to remember that Dr. Angela Washington didn't disappear. She was just waiting for the right moment to return." Blackstone nodded slowly. "We have a proposition for you." Angela waited. "Chief Technology Officer," Morrison said. "Full equity package, salary commensurate with your expertise and our gratitude. Complete autonomy over the quantum computing division. Plus," Chen added, "retroactive consulting fees for yesterday's solution. 7 figures. Angela considered the offer. A year ago, even 6 months ago, she might have leaped at it. The chance to return to her field at the highest levels, to lead cutting-edge research again, to reclaim everything she'd lost. It was everything she'd dreamed of during those long nights caring for her mother. But 3 years of service had taught her something about her own values that pure research never could. "I'm honored by the offer," she said finally, "but I have conditions." "Name them," Blackstone said immediately. "First, I want to establish a scholarship fund for students from underrepresented communities, pursuing advanced degrees in quantum computing. Full funding, tuition, housing, research stipends. I want to ensure that the next generation of brilliant minds doesn't have to choose between education and family responsibility." "Done," Blackstone agreed. "What else?" "Second, I want Novatech to partner with community colleges and historically black colleges and universities to create pathways for non-traditional students to enter technology careers. Not everyone follows the traditional academic route, and genius appears in unexpected places." Morrison was taking notes. "Absolutely. What else?" "Third, I want to establish a policy that service workers throughout Novatech facilities are treated with the same respect as any other human beings. No one should be invisible because of their job title or uniform." Blackstone winced slightly at that last condition, but he nodded. "Consider it company policy, effective immediately." Angela smiled for the first time since entering the room. "Then I accept your offer with one final request." "What's that?" "I'd like to address your entire staff. Executives, engineers, support personnel, everyone. I have some thoughts about recognizing talent wherever it appears, and I think the message might resonate. 2 weeks later, Angela stood before Novatech's entire workforce in the company's main auditorium. The room was packed, with additional employees joining virtually from satellite offices around the world. News outlets had picked up the story of the Waitress turned CTO, and the auditorium buzzed with energy and curiosity. Angela approached the podium with the same quiet confidence she'd shown in the boardroom. She looked out over the sea of faces, engineers and accountants, security guards and executives, people from every background and level of the organization. "My name is Dr. Angela Washington," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "Until 2 weeks ago, most of you knew me as the woman who served your lunch at the Meridian Club. Some of you didn't know me at all. I was invisible, the way service workers often are in our society." She paused, letting that sink in. But invisibility is not the same as absence of value. For 3 years, I listened to brilliant people struggle with problems I could solve, not because I was smarter than them, but because my background and experience gave me different tools. The tragedy wasn't that I remained silent. The tragedy was that our society's biases made my expertise invisible. The auditorium was completely quiet now. In this room right now, there are probably people whose talents are being overlooked because they don't fit expected patterns. The quiet analyst who has revolutionary ideas but doesn't speak up in meetings. The security guard who understands systems architecture from years of observation. The administrative assistant who sees inefficiencies that could save millions of dollars. Angela's voice grew stronger, more passionate. Excellence doesn't announce itself with credentials and fancy titles. Excellence shows up in the work, in the solutions, in the quiet dedication of people who care more about doing the job right than getting credit for it. She looked directly at Blackstone, who was sitting in the front row. The greatest mistake leaders can make is assuming they know where talent lives. It lives everywhere, in expected places and unexpected ones, in corner offices and service corridors, in people who look like what you expect genius to look like, in people who challenge every assumption you've ever made. The entire room erupted in thunderous applause that went on for nearly 2 minutes. 6 months later, Angela Washington still arrived at work each morning at 7:30 a.m. sharp, but now she entered through the executive parking garage of Novatech Industries. Her corner office on the 32nd floor offered a panoramic view of the city, but the framed photograph on her desk showed her mother's proud smile at her MIT graduation. Every day at 11:45 a.m., Angela made the same journey she'd made for 3 years, to the Meridian Club for lunch. But now she sat at table 12 as Novatech's chief technology officer, discussing quantum computing innovations with some of the most powerful people in tech. The servers who brought her meals knew her story, and she made sure to learn theirs as well. Roberto Delgado, the head chef who had shown her kindness during her darkest moments, was now enrolled in a business management program funded by the Angela Washington Educational Foundation. Marcus, the night security guard, was pursuing his computer science degree through Novatech's new community college partnership program. Young engineers throughout the industry sought her guidance, and Angela made time for every request. Her message was always the same. Your worth isn't determined by who recognizes it. Excellence is its own reward, but don't be afraid to let your light shine when the world needs what you have to offer. The quantum computing division Angela led had become the most innovative and profitable segment of Novatech. But perhaps more importantly, the company had become known for its inclusive culture, its recognition of talent in unexpected places, and its commitment to lifting up underrepresented voices in technology. Richard Blackstone, who had once mocked her education, now introduced Angela at industry conferences as the most brilliant mind in quantum computing and the most humble person I've ever met. Their working relationship was professional and productive, built on mutual respect rather than power dynamics. Every year on the anniversary of her mother's passing, Angela visited Sarah Washington's grave with fresh flowers and a progress report on the scholarship fund that had helped dozens of students pursue their dreams without choosing between education and family loyalty. Her story had become legend in tech circles, not just because of her technical brilliance, but because of her grace under pressure, her commitment to service, and her proof that genius appears in the most unexpected forms. Universities invited her to speak. Documentary filmmakers wanted to tell her story. And young women of color in STEM saw her as proof that their paths might be unconventional, but were no less valid. But Angela's favorite part of each day remained the same as it had for 3 years. Every evening she turned off her computer, straightened her desk and walked through Novatech's offices, greeting the custodial staff by name, chatting with the security guards, and acknowledging every person who kept the company running. Because she had learned that the most powerful people are often the ones nobody sees coming. Sometimes the greatest discoveries aren't made in laboratories or boardrooms, but in the quiet moments when someone finally pays attention to the wisdom that was always there, waiting to be heard.